My name is Nancy Trevino with Stop the Money Pipeline. Really excited to have you all here this evening. You could be doing anything else, but you're here for our DOGE Accountability Campaign mass call. We've got amazing speakers slated up, but before we get started, we're going to have you enjoy some of this music and ask you to introduce yourselves in the chat. My preferred gender pronoun is she, her, ella. Again, Nancy Trevino with Stop the Money Pipeline. Please let us know who you are, where you're calling in from this evening, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. It looks like the chat function was disabled, but it should be enabled now, and everyone should be able to chat and introduce yourselves. All right, I see you on there, Donald. Sorry for that little glitch, but now I can see folks calling from Houston, Ocala, Lakewood, Colorado. Hi, Victoria. Kimmy in North Carolina. Hi, Jan. Great to have you all here. Welcome to our DOGE Accountability Campaign mass call. We're thrilled to have you here this evening and the amazing lineup of speakers that we have coming up. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Hope you're enjoying this music. Hi, Joe. Hi, Mary Ann, Margaret. Hi, Gina, Amber, and Susan, and Bob. Thanks for being here. Once again, I'm Nancy Trevino with Stop the Money Pipeline. Glad to have you all with us this evening. And keep introducing yourselves in the chat. Tell us where you're calling in from and what your preferred gender pronoun is as well. Before we get started, I'd like just to make a quick announcement regarding accessibility on our call. So if you can put that slide up real quickly, Alec. For those of you who would like to access closed captions. You'll see in the bottom of your control bar and your Zoom window the option to select closed captions for this call. You can click on it. It'll say live transcript button or show captions. If you don't see that, you can click on the more option first, then select the caption. You'll see in the images here that you can choose the captions, and it'll show at the bottom above your toolbar throughout the call. All right. Once again, thanks for being with us today. We're thrilled with the incredible lineup of speakers, including Representative John Larson of Connecticut's 1st District, Communications Workers of America President Claude Cummings Jr., American Federation of Teachers Union President Randy Weingarten, Nadira Kabir, a former USAID federal worker with the American Federation of Government Employees, Jeff Hauser, Executive Director of Revolving Door Project, and Evan Sutton of the Tesla Takedown movement. We're inspired to be part of the organizing and mass mobilizations across the country as the Trump regime keeps the National Guard in our cities, cages and deports our immigrant neighbors and family members, funds wars instead of programs that benefit working families, and continues enriching the billionaire class. We're honored to be launching this DOGE Accountability Campaign with our partners with the Tesla Takedown movement and Communications Workers of America, as we bring all of you together to demand accountability for the utter chaos Elon Musk and DOGE created. We want to send a clear message to the entire billionaire class that there are growing and real risks of political accountability for attacks on our democracy and their role in the Trump administration. Before I hand it over to our speakers, I want to just give a quick overview of the campaign, and much of what you are aware of and maybe you're not as aware of. The Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE, was a complete and utter disaster. President Trump and Elon Musk promised DOGE would save U.S. taxpayers trillions of dollars. We saw that was not the case. Instead, it cost us all money. It destroyed vital agencies, gutted regulation, and exposed the personal data of nearly every American. DOGE personnel, many of whom were never subjected to a proper background check, shredded core functions of our government. They fired hundreds of thousands of dedicated public servants and replaced them with political partisans with little or no experience in government. And according to recent filings, DOGE officials appear to have exposed the sensitive personal data of nearly every American in violation of the law. The American public, deserve to know what happened to our personal data. We deserve a full accounting of DOGE's actions, including whether DOGE personnel or other Trump appointees personally profited from or influenced federal contracts. We deserve the answers and we're demanding them. We're grateful for members of Congress's efforts to hold DOGE personnel accountable, including demands for investigations into DOGE's sharing of sensitive Social Security data. Our campaign is centered on urging more members of Congress to commit to hold congressional investigations and hearings into DOGE and Elon Musk in the new Congress, and we need your support to do that. We'll be organizing a week of action from June 15th through the 18th, where we'll be delivering our DOGE accountability petition that many of you have signed to the district offices of members of Congress. So please sign up to join our week of action to deliver this petition that has nearly 45,000 signatures and dozens of endorsements from civil society organizations and unions to your member of Congress's district offices. So you'll see in the chat, we'll drop in the sign up form there. And once again, since DOGE's inception and reign during Trump's first year in office, just a few stats I want to run by you ahead of us getting to our speakers. 30,000 grants and contracts were ended or prematurely terminated in 64 agencies, departments, or federal bodies. So those are tens of thousands of grants and contracts. Of those, nearly 30% of the grants and contracts had already been fully paid before they were terminated, providing either no immediate savings at all or savings of less than $1. So the trillions of dollars that were promised to be saved by American taxpayers just did not materialize. The federal workforce was thrown into utter chaos, with 300,000 losing their jobs. And DOGE's legacy still persists. Individuals like Russell Vought, director of the Office of Management and Budget, has used his office to embed DOGE personnel in federal agencies as full-time staff and has institutionalized funding cuts through illegal use of the Impoundment Control Act. Some of the harmful effects of DOGE are still hidden, and we demand full investigations. We've got a great lineup of speakers coming up, but right before I hand over the mic to our first speaker, we're going to drop a quick poll question for you all to answer. Alec, if you're able to drop the poll question, that'd be great. And here it is. We just like to get a temperature check from you all. Has DOGE ever accessed your bank account information? We want to, a lot of questions are unknown and answers to these questions are unknown, but we'd like to get a feel from you all about this. So I'll give it a few more seconds as you all participate in this quick poll. All right, I'm going to end the poll. And what do the results say? It looks like 4% of you all who are on tonight have responded yes, no for 10%, and I don't know, 86%. And so response to this question. If you've applied to supplemental security income, the Social Security Administration asks for your bank account information. So if you're on the call, and if you've done that or have a loved one who has, um, DOGE has access to this sensitive personal information, right? And DOGE may very well have information to, has had information to a lot more. And we'll just get into that a bit more. But appreciate you all participating in the poll so we get a sense of what folks know about access to our sensitive data. But now it's time to hand over the mic to our wonderful speakers. I'm honored to introduce Representative John B. Larson, who proudly represents Connecticut's 1st District. Now in his 14th term, Representative Larson sits on the influential House Ways and Means Committee, including the Subcommittee on Trade and the Social Security Subcommittee, where he serves as the ranking member. Since DOGE's inception, Representative Larson has been a vocal critic and leader in demanding accountability for DOGE's potential illegal actions. And in January, he joined Representative Richard Neal of Massachusetts and Joe Morell of New York in calling for a criminal investigation into potential DOGE misuse of our Social Security data. Representative Larson, the mic is all yours.
Well, first and foremost, Nancy, thank you for all of your work. And if ever there was a time in our country's history where we need to fully educate the public as to what's transpiring under a Republican presidency, a Republican controlled House, a Republican controlled Senate, and obviously deep and abiding concerns about the Supreme Court as well. But in a system of checks and balances, as was designed by the Constitution, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have abrogated their rights. And so, even on a committee like the Ways and Means Committee that has oversight over Social Security, they've looked the other way when it comes to holding people accountable. How so? First and foremost, the minority always has a right to do something that's called a resolution of inquiry. Now, that's not a common use, but nonetheless, it's been on the books as a rule of the House since 1879. And what that does is allow you to call someone like Elon Musk, as I have done, before the Ways and Means Committee and DOGE and to testify under oath. Why? Because when you testify under oath, if you lie, that is a criminal activity. And so witnesses and their attorneys tend to make sure that they tell the truth. And as you know, the Republicans blocked that from happening. And Elon Musk never showed up. And they suspended the resolution of inquiry, again, that's been on the books since 1879, for a 60-day period. As soon as that 60 days was up, we entered another resolution. And during this time, remember, we had two whistleblowers come forward with information about what DOGE was doing. And Nancy did a great job of explaining this, but even more viscerally, these are 24-year-olds that have no accountability and have never been vetted and have been let loose to go over people's public documents and records. We stood up and passed legislation when Trump removed an administrator who refused to let them act because she knows the law to have access to people's private documents and information, all while Trump and was denying that this was even happening and wasn't going on, and saying all they were doing is trying to make this a more efficient uh, department. Let's be clear about this. What are they after here? This is all about their plan to privatize not just Social Security, but why is Social Security so important to them? Can you name another agency in government that has a trust fund of the people's money? Now, Medicare, Medicaid have a trust fund, but it's around $200 billion. Social Security's trust fund is $2,700,000,000,000. Even a person who makes 500 billion a year like Elon Musk was salivating over the prospect of getting their hands on 2,700,000,000,000. This was never about efficiency. This was about privatization and getting their hands on that money, something that previous Republican presidents, including Reagan and Bush, attempted, but they did it in a direct way and in going through and saying and having a philosophical discussion as to whether or not what was the best way. And of course, we successfully blocked them in 2005 and 2006 from this happening. And it led to the Democrats taking back control of the House of Representatives. We're back. It's a deja vu all over again, as they say, as here they are again, except this time more skilled, trying to break this down. How so? You already mentioned this, Nancy, in terms of what they've done with decimating more than 7,000 employees laid off in an agency where 10,000 baby boomers a day become eligible for Social Security and who are dying to get information and talk to a human being who can actually direct them. And so, both laying off 7,000 people and closing regional offices and not fixing a phone service that can communicate with people was all an attempt to say, look, this system is broke and can't be fixed. And so, we're going to have to replace that. And for a younger generation, let us tell you that we're going to produce twice the money that you see that Social Security creates. Funny thing, however, when put under oath or asked the question, does that mean that this is guaranteed? The answer, as you know, of course, is well, nothing is guaranteed, but we can show you over a 20-year period, 30-year period, that you'll get greater return on your investment. I said, is it guaranteed? Oh, well, no. Does it cover spouses and widows and children? Well, there are separate programs for that. Does it cover disability? Oh, well, no, that's a whole separate issue itself. Well, Social Security covers widows and spouses and dependent children and disability that more veterans rely on than they do on the VA. And this is what is at stake because their goal here is beyond privatization. Their goal is the 2,700,000,000,000 of the people's money. And that's why Americans should be outraged, number one. Number two, the people that are after this have made their profits, and God bless them. They made their profits in data collection. So when DOGE is going in there and specifically against the law, going after people's information and even Trump's own judiciary writes and calls out the fact that they have been in there and selling information for political reasons to adjust political campaigns. One use of data, but another use as well as to mine and have all the information about every single individual in this country because all 300 130 million Americans are covered, and now close to 84 million people are receiving benefits. This is critical. And what you're a part of and what you're underscoring today has got to get out to the public so that they further understand it. Trump administration tries to say, oh no, they're just overreacting to this. They wouldn't, even when the commissioner was sitting in front of us, who also is the head of the IRS agency, they won't come before the Ways and Means Committee as Social Security, but he chairs both. So I asked them the question, and they said, we're not here in that capacity, and therefore do not have to answer your question, Congressman. And this is the Congress of the United States. You're here under oath. You have to answer that. And we were ruled out of order and voted out of order by the Republicans. And then they suspended resolutions of inquiry till after November. So, with no resolution of inquiry there, the only other way to go forward here is impeachment, which we have filed as well. But I want to credit my colleagues, every single Democratic member on the Ways and Means Committee, led by Rich Neal, a Social Security benefactor himself who lost his mother, his father, and then the grandmother that was taking care of the five children. He knows that his whole family was raised and educated on Social Security. It is why it's the nation's number one anti poverty program for the elderly, number one anti poverty program for children, and the disability program that more veterans rely on than they get from the VA. All the more reason why we not only need to protect Social Security and protect the data, but it needs to be expanded. It has not been expanded since Richard Nixon was president of the United States. That is the mission that I am dedicated to and focused on because that's what needs to happen. And I say to our Republican colleagues as well, this is the best economic development plan that the United States could ever offer in an inflationary period that has both global impact and impact here at home. Why? Because people that are impacted the most are people on fixed income. And people who are impacted the most on fixed income are people who all they have is Social Security. And in that case, 40% of all the people on Social Security and receiving benefits, it's the only thing they have. The vision of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or my mother would forgive me if I didn't say, actually, Francis Perkins, who came up with the idea, gave it to Roosevelt, and was the first Secretary of Labor to make sure she saw that through. That's why we introduced keeping our field offices open. That's why we introduced protecting America's Social Security data. That's why we had four resolutions of inquiry. And as you started this off, Nancy, we are not going to bring them forward under resolutions of inquiry when we're in the majority. We will subpoena them in front of the Ways and Means Committee, and no one can resist that, or that's a criminal offense in and of itself. What you're doing here is so important, and the American people need to know that these DOGE employees, they're not only in Social Security, but they're in Social Security because they see that as the area that's most lucrative for them, both in terms of the data, but do not dismiss at all what their real goal here is: 2,700,000,000,000 of the people's money. Rise up and unite. This is singular, the genius of Francis Perkins and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. In this time and in these economic times, imagine every congressional district on average receives 280 million plus monthly to beneficiaries of Social Security. Where do they spend that money? Right back in the very economy we're trying to help in aid. And imagine it hasn't been adjusted in over 54 years. And imagine for 40% of Americans, they all have. And further, for all the women on this call, 5 million Americans get below poverty level checks from the wealthiest nation in the world, from our most successful insurance program, all because Congress hasn't acted to enhance it. 5 million, the majority of whom are women, and the majority of them who are women of color. That in and of itself is criminal, and why we must take back the House and lift all of those people out of poverty by making the new floor for Social Security always 125% of what the poverty level should be. And how do we pay for all of this? Well, now you'll find out where the opposition comes from. We ask billionaires to pay the same thing that each and every one of you do. No billionaire is going to go bankrupt having to pay their fair share of Social Security. But this wealth gap is so large that as few of them as there are, a little more than 1%, that pays for all the expansion and extension of the solvency and the programs and the reduction of taxation on Social Security just by having them pay their fair share. I think the cap should be lifted on everyone, but it rises each year. But we'll start at 400,000, and that in and of itself will allow us to correct a number of these problems, along with restoring the fact and having them come before Alf and imprisoning those who have broke the law.
Thank you so much, Representative
Sorry, I
Larson.
probably went on a little long, but I get
It's great. I think you highlighted some really critical things, and especially right, the agenda behind wanting to privatize Social Security. So thank you so much for joining us. We have to move on to the other speakers. We appreciate your leadership, and we'll continue sounding the alarm, demanding accountability for DOGE and Musk. Next
Nancy.
up, I'm honored to introduce CWA Union President Cloud Cummings Jr., who was elected as president of CWA in 2023. Prior to his election as president, Mr. Cummings served as an at-large member of CWA's executive board, then as vice president of CWA's District 6, representing workers in Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas. Mr. Cummings, the mic is all yours.
Thank you so much. Let me say, I don't know if Reverend Larson is still, Representative Larson is still on, but thank you so much for those great remarks. You really shared a lot of great information on tonight. And thank you, Nancy, for the work that you are doing. And thank you for inviting me to speak on tonight. You know, I'm excited to see so many union activists still willing to call out the 1%, the billionaire bosses and the oligarchs. I'm going to keep my remarks very brief since there's a lot of other speakers on tonight, and I want to hear them all. You know, planning is key so our actions can be decisive and repair some of the incredible damage done by Donald Trump and his buddy Elon Musk. Musk stood on stage with a chainsaw and promised to hack his way through the lives of tens of thousands of fellow workers. With Trump's permission, he did just that, cutting workers essential to the function of our core institutions. This diabolical duo hacked and slashed their way through union contracts and made it harder for working people to get the benefits they earn. At the same time, he opened millions of Americans to identity theft, and other grift through data breaches and violations of the law that must now be investigated by Congress. The DOGE data breaches impacted Social Security and the senior citizens who rely on that income, making it harder for vulnerable people to resolve problems with the system, many of whom live month to month, and in some cases can barely cover meals and utilities. The data breaches also expose information about workers who file unfair labor practice complaints, safety complaints, and other violations of their rights on the job, potentially exposing them to retaliation from their employers. Listen, that's no coincidence. Trump and Musk are themselves some of the biggest violators of labor and employment law in this country. And they like nothing more than for CEOs to be able to retaliate against workers who stand up for themselves and their co-workers. Trump and Musk openly laughed about firing striking workers while 17,000 of my CWA members were on strike against AT&T in the Southeast. And when DOGE went after diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, he got a front row seat to the ignorance and arrogance of the people tasked with deciding which programs should be cut. Their total reliance on faulty artificial intelligence and lack of understanding of even basic humanity. Within CWA, we're on a mission to educate our entire membership on the dangers of oligarchy and how to fight back against the complete domination of wealth and privilege. To this end, we're offering our fighting oligarchy training to any groups who want to participate. Elon Musk has used that place of privilege, from his daddy's emerald mines to his hair plugs to his pet projects like SpaceX. He has used his proximity to geniuses to pass himself off as one. He's used his proximity to political power to deal himself a winning hand with Trump, completely rewriting the rules of broadband expansion in this country to include his union-busting, unreliable satellite service and push out long-lasting, reliable fiber and the union workers who connect our communities. We at CWA have been speaking out, and we will continue to speak truth to power and hold our elected officials accountable for co-signing these destructive policies. I spoke out during the Tesla Takedown and noticed something peculiar. Elon Musk himself started popping up on my Twitter feed, monitoring my posts. And I know some people might be intimidated by that kind of scrutiny over what you say and how you say it. But listen, I am not afraid. I'm not scared. CWA is not scared. We will call Elon out with his oligarchy and union busting and problems for our democracy because he is. Simple as that. And I know none of you are scared. So let's work together on this call and on future actions to put an end to the lies, the corruption, and sacrifice of all we hold dear, so a handful of men can have more wealth than the rest of humanity combined. Listen, I'm ready to go to work. Nancy, I'm ready to go to work. CWA is ready to go to work. And I hope you are ready to go to work as well. Thank you so much. Let's have a great call on tonight. Thank you for having me. When we fight, we win.
We win.
Fight, we win.
We win. Thank you so much for your remarks. We're so glad that CWA is a part of this campaign with us, and for your leadership as always, Mr. Cummings. Before I hand the mic to our next speaker, I'm going to make another plug to please sign up to join our Week of Action from June 15th to the 18th to deliver our DOGE Accountability petition to your members of Congress's district office. So we're going to drop that in the chat again, and we need all hands on deck to make this a successful Week of Action. So please sign up. Next, I'm honored to introduce Nadira Kabir. Nadira is a RIFT civil servant from USAID with 17 years of experience managing humanitarian, public health, and international development programs. She held multiple management and leadership roles at USAID, including Deputy Division of Chief for Private Sector engagement and leadership positions within the Middle East Bureau, focused on stabilization and crisis response efforts tied to U.S. national security interests. She holds a master's degree from George Washington University and a bachelor's degree from Clark University. Nadira, thanks for being here. The mic is all yours.
Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate you giving me this platform. As Nancy mentioned, I served at USAID until recently. My work was driven by one core belief: stability saves lives. We helped communities navigate crises, strengthen local economies, and build partnerships that advance both humanitarian goals and our national security interests. I believed in that deeply. My work in Lebanon focused on creating livelihoods, funding small businesses, and providing essential services to the Lebanese people to provide an alternative to safety nets provided by Hezbollah. In Jordan, our development investments in health, education, and economic growth gave the United States government a seat at the table to play a critical role in deals with Jordan and Israel to provide a bit more stability in the region. I was proud of the work I was part of. Then everything changed. I was in my first trimester when I got my RIF notice. Instead of preparing for my daughter, I was calculating bills, stretching savings, and applying for jobs late into the night. The question wasn't about ambition anymore, it was survival. When people discuss DOGE for federal workforce cuts, the language is abstract: policy, restructuring, efficiency. But for me, sitting at my dining table, pregnant, doing the math, it was devastatingly concrete. It was sending applications as I was being induced to give birth. It was a fear I can still feel. What happened next was almost absurd. I had to turn to the very social safety nets I'd spent my career supporting: SNAP, WIC, Medicaid. I needed them while navigating new motherhood and a job market that felt closed to me. 3 weeks before delivery, I still didn't know if I could afford to have my baby. I went down to a DC agency office while heavily pregnant, desperate for answers about coverage. After years of public service, after building systems to help others, I found myself struggling through the same systems in one of my most vulnerable moments. Today, I rent out my home, and my family and I live with friends. A year later, I'm still rebuilding. I share this because federal workers aren't statistics or budget lines. We're parents, caregivers, people trying to build stable lives while serving this country. When decisions are made without accountability, the consequences don't end at 5. They follow you home. They shape whether you can afford health care, keep a roof over your head, or plan your child's future. I'm proud of my work at USAID, but I'm here today as someone who learned that public service offers little protection when everything falls apart. When we talk about accountability, let's be clear. This isn't about org charts or budgets. It's about people. No one should face job loss, pregnancy, new motherhood, financial collapse, and housing insecurity all at once for dedicating their career to this country. Public service should not require the sacrifice. Before I hand it back to Nancy, I think it's also important for me to shed some light on the amazing cadre of national staff that were employed by USAID. They dedicated their careers at a time when the US government policies were not very welcomed in the world. And they also risked their lives in places such as Iraq to implement our diplomatic objectives. It's unfortunate that we left them behind in limbo. Thank you for giving me this platform to speak, and I hope that one day we're able to make what's been done right again.
Thank you so much, Nadira, for sharing your personal story. We're really heartbroken to hear that you are just one of the many folks whose lives were upended by people like Elon Musk and his Doge bros. We send our love your way and are here and committed to hold Musk and Doge accountable. So thanks again for being with us and sharing your story. Next up, I'm honored to introduce American Federation of Teachers Union President Randy Weingarten. AFT represents 1.8 million members. Prior to Randy's election as AFT president in 2008, she served for 11 years as president of the United Federation of Teachers, AFT Local 2, representing approximately 200,000 educators in the New York City public school system, as well as home care providers and other workers in health, law, and education. Randy has been a very vocal critic of Musk and Doge, and we're so glad to have her here tonight. Randy, the mic is all yours.
Thank you, Nancy. Can you hear me? I'm so glad, I'm so grateful to be with all of you. And I was grateful to be able to hear Nadira's comments. And I heard my dear friend Claude's comments. As many, I did a very major speech yesterday, and we're in the middle of our executive council. So I have not been able to be on the whole call, but I just want to say a couple of things. Number one, this is a really, really, really important coalition, and we have to and we have to keep pushing back on Musk and the other gazillionaires who believe that they have complete control of any of our political apparatus to be able to do everything they want to do, which is make a lot of money and surveil a lot of people and use AI and whatever other tech they have without any guardrails in any way, form, or matter. And what DOGE did and what Musk did and what we've tried to do as a labor movement in response was not only did they do what Nadira just said about taking away and cutting some of the most important humane health programs that the federal government had run. USAID is what helped protect the world from Ebola and so many other diseases. It's what helped created ways to stop hunger, which is in the post-World War II environment. Sorry for me being all social studies teachers on you. In the post-World War II environment was a way of saying America was not a police officer. America was going to be a partner in the world to help create peace and to help create a society that believed in peace and prosperity. And what DOGE did was say they're going to take away, they're going to create fear and take away the pieces of government that work for others. And they're going to surveil our data in the way in which they did it. And so many of us took lawsuits immediately, asked me, CWA, Everett, AVG, we all immediately tried to say, what the heck are you doing in Social Security, taking data? What are you doing in education, taking data and misusing data? And we found out through discovery, yeah, they did that. And we also found out because of the power of Citizens United, and if anybody has never read it, remember the Powell memo from years ago that spelled out everything that they were doing. But it took a guy like Musk to actually put it all together. That this was a corporate tech oligarchical takeover of Americans. And that is what DOGE did for the first X number of days in this administration. And part of what we tried to do in the work we were doing with Evan Sutton and others in the Tesla Takedown is that we wanted to get Musk out of federal government. And many of the things we tried to do to like push at Tesla to say, hey, buddy, do your job, go back to your job, do all of that, was to try to get him out of it and to try to get to try to get Valor Equity and Antonio Gracias and all of them out of it. But if we don't win the next election, so we can have proper hearings, they own the three branches of government. And so we have to do what we can to take the anger that we have and move it to the kind of action to win the next election. Because if we win the next election, if we win the House of Representatives, if we win the Senate, but take the House, we can subpoena them and we can hold hearings, not us, but the representatives. And we can start having a record to hold them accountable at the very time that in this liminal space, people in America want accountability and affordability. They don't want a president of the United States or the richest man in the world to be able to use the power of the United States government to enrich themselves. They want us to be able to have decent Social Security, to have a decent life with the job benefits and the wages that our members and people who are not in unions need. And so the key here, I think, is that how do we take this anger and move it to action so that we can have a real oversight in terms of accountability and a push to shift this huge wealth to be fairer. So one of the things I recommended in the 10 points that I made yesterday in a speech called Devices Down, Eyes Up, Hands On, and it was basically about education, was to have a tech tax so that the technology companies end up paying their fair share for the consequences of all of this, including Elon Musk. But we got to win an election in order in a democracy, even a democracy that is falling behind, in order to make this happen. And I, for one, will never forget the way in which they treated federal employees and the way in which they tried to steal regular Americans' data. That is for us to fight back, and we will. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Randy. And thanks for AFT support. We appreciate your leadership and for AFT to be on board with us in this campaign. Once again, right, part of this campaign is to get commitment from members of Congress to hold Musk and DOGE accountable in the new Congress, and we need all hands on deck. You can play a meaningful role by signing up to join our Week of Action from June 15th to the 18th to deliver our DOGE accountability petition to your members of Congress's district office. So we'll drop that in the chat again with a link to sign up. And next up, I'm honored to introduce Jeff Hauser, who is the founder and executive director of the Revolving Door Project. Revolving Door Project was created to scrutinize executive branch appointees to ensure that they use their office to serve the broad public interest rather than to entrench corporate power or seek personal advancement. Leading political figures in the U.S. regularly seek his input concerning corporate influence and ethics in government. Jeff, the mic is all yours.
Thank you, Nancy, for the honor of being on such a distinguished panel and the chance to attack such depraved people. Elon Musk was the face of DOGE. Elon Musk, for a period of time, ran DOGE, and Elon Musk sought to personify DOGE in himself. Musk destroyed the lives of millions, and he ought to reap the whirlwind. But Musk was not the intellectual architect of DOGE, and Musk's departure, unfortunately, did not end DOGE. DOGE had an architect, and it continues to have a puppet master, and they are the same person. There is an enduring representative of what DOGE stands for in the director of the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, Russell Vought. Russell Vought is so wrongly obscure that his name is commonly mispronounced. It does not rhyme, as it appears that it ought to, with ought, as in Russell Vought ought to be public enemy number one, or with wrought, as in Vought has indeed caused the trauma on government workers he explicitly sought to inflict. We at Revolving Door Project have been spending an increasing amount of time cataloging Vought and DOGE 2.0's ongoing legacy, and I will share some of the links at the end of my remarks. During the first Trump administration, Vought was one of the lead architects of a policy originally known as Schedule F, which aimed to seize civil servant protections from tens of thousands of federal employees in order to subject them to political loyalty tests. Vought then chaired the transition portion of Project 2025, designing Trump's war on both government workers and Congress's constitutionally granted spending power. Vought's effectiveness in DOGE 2.0 comes from the OMB's immense structural power. The OMB is the hub of nearly every spoke of the federal government in terms of both spending and regulation. As such, Vote shapes the federal budget proposals according to his own ideological priorities. Both an extreme social Darwinist and a self-described Christian nationalist, Vote is implementing a reverse Robin Hood agenda. If a program is benevolent and useful, like nutrition assistance, Vote slashes it to offset some of the cost of his extreme tax cuts for the rich. His career goal of dismantling the social safety net has been turbocharged during DOGE 2.0. And through its oversight of the government's regulatory powers, Vote makes sure that the wish list of every corporate lobbyist is accomplished across the entire executive branch. We must hold Vote and everyone who has empowered him accountable. It is possible. Civil society ran a Republican-style messaging campaign against then Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem so effectively that Trump fired her. Musk's DOGE 1.0 similarly became radioactive due to terrific activism from the labor movement, from Tesla Takedown, and so many others. We can and should do the same to Vote's DOGE 2.0. The right wing is great at identifying and popularizing victims who come to symbolize arguments for particular courses of action. For example, the GOP used Laken Riley's tragic murder as a pretext to drum up xenophobia and pass namesake legislation that slashes due process. It's grotesque that a bipartisan majority exploited an individual's plight against the wish of her father to turbocharge fascism. But we can take this approach and use it for good. There's no shortage of people whose lives have been upended by Vote-led efforts to concentrate federal spending authority in the executive branch and selectively sabotage government's enforcement capacity against the rich. Vote's cuts have already caused deleterious consequences: missed cancer treatments, rampant financial predation, foregone medical breakthroughs, blocked nutrition assistance, lapsed Medicaid funding, stalled infrastructure projects, and diminished disaster responses. And just as importantly, from the CFPB and IRS to the EPA, Trump has cut the workers who are responsible for policing elite criminality. Some of the harmful effects of DOGE are already evident. Many are still hidden. Most will not take full effect until the dangers we would have ordinarily expected our government to mitigate or prevent fully emerge, like Ebola. He's putting people at heightened risk of foodborne illnesses, train derailments, and so much more. The people who've already been negatively affected by Vote can fairly be described as Vote's victims. That's why we should all support the impeach Vote movement. We need to end DOGE 2.0. Of course, convicting Vote is not likely in 2026, but that's not the immediate point. Because motions to impeach are privileged, any House member can call upon such a resolution, and the Speaker must promptly schedule a time to consider it. By connecting the proliferation of hunger, disease, and other daily struggles to Vote's depraved actions, we have a chance to do what FDR and New Deal activists did in the 1930s: discredit Hoover's pro-oligarch orthodoxy for 2 generations. There's no better time to start than the present. The monumental task of de-Trumpification will require halting and then reversing all the damage set in motion by Vote, DOGE, and DOGE 2.0. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your remarks, Jeff, and for all the amazing work that Revolving Door Project is doing, and especially, right, in addition to holding Musk and DOGE accountable, Russell Vote is one of the villains that has institutionalized the mandate of DOGE. Thanks for being for us this evening. And next, I'm honored to introduce our final speaker, Evan Sutton of the Tesla Takedown movement, who's based in Seattle and has been leading the fight against fascist Elon Musk since last year. Evan, the mic is all yours.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and thank you to all of our amazing speakers and the leaders on this call, and all of you for being here. I just want to start with a couple of questions. If you're watching this, do you have a Social Security number? Have you ever filed a tax return? Have you ever had student loans? Did you serve in uniform? Do you or somebody you love get your health care from Medicaid or Medicare or at the VA? Because if you answered yes to any of those questions, then Elon Musk and one of his little Doge bros like Eddie Big Balls Coristine or Marco Normalize Indian Hate Velez probably have stolen your personal sensitive data. We know that they were deep in all of our federal systems and still are. but we don't know what they did with the data that they got access to. And that's just the very beginning of it all. While he was still at Doge, Elon received billions in new contracts for his companies. He fired regulators who were investigating his businesses for everything from shady business practices to violations of securities law to abusing animals and violating workers' rights. And it might be old-fashioned, but I believe that government officials who break the law and violate the public trust for their own personal benefit need to be held accountable. The good news is people have power. I know that it feels like a lifetime and 1,000 crises ago, but I want you to get in your brain and go back in the Wayback Machine to January of 2025. Because at the time, Elon Musk looked unstoppable. He had just spent $250 million to elect Donald Trump and put Republicans in the majority. Trump had created a fake agency and put Elon in charge of it. He was at the center of the Trump regime universe, swinging a chainsaw at the federal government and talking about feeding agencies into a wood chipper. And he looked unstoppable. Tesla Takedown started with 2 people outside a showroom in Manhattan. Their photos caught people's imagination, and 2 weeks later, there were 50 events all over the country. Within just a few weeks, there were hundreds every week, and by this time last year, there had already been 2,000 individual actions at Tesla showrooms that put the company's stock and Elon Musk under extreme pressure. That grassroots pressure put strain on the Trump-Musk relationship that caused Doge 1.0 to break apart earlier and having done less damage than it otherwise would have. There's still, as you've heard, all sorts of damage being done, and that's why it's so critical that we keep this momentum moving forward to make sure that Elon and all of his little minions are held accountable. Now, signing this pledge should be a pretty easy ask for anyone running for Congress because Americans hate corruption. Americans are sick of a system where a single billionaire can buy an election and then bend government to his will. But we know Republicans aren't going to stand up to Musk. They aren't going to sign this pledge because they've enabled him every step of the way. They're bought in on Vote's project. They're all in behind Trumpism of tearing apart our government for private gain. So that leaves us with Democrats. Now, it doesn't mean that we're not going to demand it of Republicans. It's important that we put them on the spot. So we're going to be delivering these petitions to Republicans so that they have to tell us to our faces that they are the party of corrupt billionaires. But in politics, we only get what we demand. So even though it should be easy, we're going to have to show up. We're super grateful for leaders like Representative Larson, who have been beating the drum on this since day one. But we're going to need to make sure every Democrat and every nominee in the Democratic Party puts this at the top of their agenda. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks. And that's where you come in. We're going to need you to step up and demand that your representatives or the candidates running to represent you commit to holding DOGE accountable. That's going to mean asking the people who are running for open seats, our incumbents and challengers, to get on board that accountability is a real thing that voters want. This is a moment to draw a line in the sand and say corruption has consequences, and I hope that you'll help us make sure that that happens.
Thanks so much for your remarks, Evan, and for all the awesome work with Tesla Takedown and everything you've been doing since the Trump administration stepped into power a second time. We want leaders like you who are still on the call with us this evening to join us in delivering our DOGE accountability petition signed by tens of thousands of people like you to members of Congress's district offices for the week of action I've mentioned several times throughout the call, which goes from June 15th through the 18th. We will ask members of Congress to commit to holding hearings and investigations into DOGE and Musk in the new Congress. We'll share the sign-up form once again in the chat. So please sign up and an organizer will get in touch with you very, very soon. As we've heard throughout the evening, Musk's DOGE has caused immense harm and put our sensitive personal information at risk. They've ended the lives of millions and appreciate all of the contributions that you all have been making in the chat throughout the evening. And we're just going to need all of your support and all hands on deck to ensure members of Congress hold DOGE personnel accountable in the new Congress. Thanks so much for being part of this fight and for joining us this evening. A huge thank you to all of our incredible speakers for joining us as well. We will be in touch. There's been several questions of whether we're going to share the recording and resources. We will do that. We hope all of you have a great evening. Thanks for being here, and we'll be in touch and see you soon. Take good care, everyone.